Hey guys, this video is about Soular. He was on real live street production and he was setting the record straight about Jaguar himself, the incident with Goomba. This is the first time he has spoken out. So just a brief recap of who Soular is. He's an ex-member of Carbonation. So the leader, Nature Boy, is currently in prison in Atlanta, serving time for rape, as well as a multitude of other charges. But we know because Nature Boy is in jail does not mean that this group is not operating. We know that they do keep in contact with each other because a lot of them have children together. So Soular began to lay the picture out of how he and Jaguar initially met. So Nature Boy's wife, the leader who is in prison, Velvet, is now living with Soular. And to complicate matters more, she found out she was 7 weeks pregnant. So she's going to have Soular's baby. She also have a little girl for Nature Boy. Now, to complicate matters even further, he has another child on the way, Janae, who is about 5 months pregnant. And yes, she was also in Carbonation. Now, after meeting Jaguar, Soular moved into her house with her mom and her husband after a week and a half of meeting the family and meeting Jaguar. She was comfortably enough to move Soular in, a strange man, after a week and a half of knowing him. Although Gerald said he did not want anyone coming into the home. That's to show how much power he had in that relationship. He had none. So Soular said the reason why he and Gerald fought in front of that barber shop was because Gerald became jealous. But he did not take accountability for his actions in that trio where he came into the picture, imposed himself on this couple who was having a rough patch in their marriage to begin with. So when he came in to the picture, instead of diffusing the situation, remedying what was happening, or helping this couple, he made it worse. So Jaguar began calling Soular nephew, just I guess because they were bonding. And so when this incident happened in front of the barbershop, Soular said it was actually Gerald who was fighting with his wife, and no one was breaking it up. And so he intervened to save Jaguar. And when he intervened, he grabbed Gerald by the belt area and kind of held him back from throwing any kind of punches towards Jaguar, at which time Goomba wrestled him down to the ground and was throwing punches at him, and he kept saying, "I love you, man. You need help. I love you, man." He said he did not want to fight him because he knew he needed a lot of help. He needed therapy. He did not need to fight him. He said, as a matter of fact, when the cops came, they gave them the option of pressing charges, and he declined because he knew Goomba did not need to be in a jail. He needed some type of psychiatric treatment. So he did not fight him. He did not press charges. So when the cops came on the scene and Jaguar was acting very belligerent, she was arrested and she was taken down to police headquarters and subsequently transferred to a mental hospital because she was having a psychotic break. Everyone saw it. She was throwing her son's ashes. She was rubbing her face with the ashes of her dead son. And what was so alarming was Soular making the confession that he did the same thing. He rubbed his face with her dead son's ashes, he said, to show solidarity and to show support of her in what she was doing and to be spiritually connected in some way. That is a whole bunch of crock. This is madness we're looking at its finest. Who does that? How are you going to desecrate a human body by taking the ashes and rubbing it on your face? I mean, talk about the most bizarre things. You could not write this, folks. This is straight out of Bizarre human behavior. Now, the part where Solar rubbed the ashes on his face, we did not see that part, but he said he did it. So Solar then said the way he met Jaguar, he went to Louisiana. Jaguar was in Louisiana at the same time. And somebody in the wherever they were said, "Come over here and meet Jaguar, right?" So when he came over to meet her, he said at first glance he did not like her at all because he thought she was kind of sloppy in a lot of her ways. But as he became to get to know her, a lot of her stories he said they had in common. And so they bonded over that, even to the point where she told him she had a cult background. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. She might have said that just for him to feel comfortable because he's coming from a cult background. So Solar said it is not that she wanted to bring him in as a family member overnight. In fact, she was setting up boundaries when she called him nephew. And he welcomed it because it showed that they had that barrier that they were not going to cross. So he said, in spite of what people believed, they were not sleeping together. He said all he wanted to do was support Jaguar and Goomba. And in this case, Goomba was out of control. He was going through a rough patch. He was having that PTSD. It kicked in. And so he just wanted to lash out at both Jaguar as well as Solar. And this started from Louisiana when they were driving back. Solar said that in the car driving back from Louisiana, it was a rough go because they had to actually get out of the car, he and Jaguar, take all the luggages out and try to hail some type of vehicle, flag down a car, or get some type of assistance like Uber to get off that highway and leave Gerald behind in that car and the gun. Because he said Gerald had a gun, he was flashing the gun, he was very menacing. He put one bullet in the chamber and he pointed the gun towards Jaguar and said, "If you want to kill me, here's the gun." Then he pointed the gun to himself and said he was going to unlive himself. So Solar said because he and Jaguar felt endangered, he wasn't so worried about himself because he knew he can take Goomba down. But he felt as though he needed to stay there because of Jaguar. And so he was going to protect her from her husband. So after they were on the side of the road and they couldn't get any cars to stop, an Uber would charge an arm and a leg to come out and get them because they were not in a very good location on that highway. And so he said they got back in the car, packed the luggages back in the car. And he said he went to Gerald and said, "Listen, man, all I want to do is get us back home. Let's go home." So Gerald, he said he and Jaguar got back in the car. Jaguar took the wheel and Gerald went to the back seat where he slept. But as he was sleeping, he had a gun on his lap. And Solar said he didn't want to take it away because if he had awakened and the gun was not there, he would have went ballistic because he kept playing with the gun for several hours as they were driving. And he would just be pointing it and playing with it and just almost like a death wish. So after Goomba and Solar had altercation, Solar went back home. However, he remained in contact with Jaguar, although Goomba did not want them to remain in contact. About 2 years ago, Jaguar Wright had an interview with CarbonNation's leader. She interviewed Nature Boy, and that's where they had first made that connection upon the interview. Moving forward to today, we see where ex members of Carbonation is now in Jaguar's circle. So guys, now that Solar is living with Velvet and she's expecting a child for him, how do you think Eligio, being in jail incarcerated, how do y'all think he is responding to the fact that this ex-member is now with his wife? And this man, Solar, is raising his daughter. But more importantly, do you guys think that Solar and the leader of CarbonNation are going to come to blows over Velvet? because she's still his wife. And Soular was supposed to be his right-hand man. Soular handled the finances. And Velvet is now with Soular, expecting a child. So Jaguar is now connected to all these people. And she is very deep into her relationship with all of them because she, Soular, and Velvet are cutting songs together. So after meeting Jaguar, a week and a half into meeting her, Soular moves into her home. And Gerald started to feel some type of way because here's this strange man in his home. He is giving a lot of attention to his wife, giving her neck rubs, etc. So Gerald became jealous and he said something might have happened on one of those occasions that he left the room, because Soular said they were never apart, not for one moment. All three of them were always together. But Gerald said that's not true. When I left the room several times and came back, I felt as if something had happened between them. That might have been jealousy, maybe paranoia. However, any strange man coming into your home, that in itself is devastating. But to see this man paying your wife attention, rubbing her neck and giving her all the positive vibes and telling her, well, your husband should have treated you better. Oh, you deserve better. Oh, you don't deserve this. That is putting a wedge in the marriage, and shame on Soular for that. And to this day, he's not taking responsibility into his role of what went on in Jaguar and Goomba's marriage when he was in the picture for only about 2 weeks. I can understand Goomba thinking that something was going on, because here's this guy who we bonded, we were supposed to be close, all of a sudden he's tight with my wife and he's turning against me. So of course Goomba is going to think something is going on. I mean, like I said before, if people want to cheat, they can cheat in plain sight, because it only takes but a minute, okay? So Goomba felt when he went to the bathroom or he went into some other room and came back, that's when something may have happened. But he said he really got closer to Goomba because he and Goomba resonated more. They were more on a intellectual as well as spiritual level. And Jaguar just happened to be a part of it, but he really wasn't friends with Jag in the beginning. And when we saw the fight in front of the barber shop where he was saying, I love you, man, I love you, man, he said it was a result of all the talks he had in the past with Goomba, and he knew his journey, he knew where he was at, he knew he needed a lot of love and attention, and he needed healing. And so when he was talking to him in front of the barber shop as he was punching him, and he was telling him, I love you, man, it was for him to realize that he's not the enemy. He does not wish him harm. He's not going to fight him. He's just going to embrace him with all the love that he can embrace him with. But Gerald was very angry. The only thing he wanted to do was to fight Soular. So that told me that there was a lot of jealousy and rage, and he just wanted to get it out of his system. So Soular said people who treat their women in a very negative light, you gotta wonder about them, because he believes that Jaguar would not say anything negative against him. But Gooba, on the other hand, is full of trash. And need I remind you guys, this is the same man who was in a cult, who was beating women and allegedly raping women. I'm not saying he did it, I'm just saying he was part of that cult that did all these things, allegedly. He would want another man to respect him, so he really should have been showing respect towards Gerald and know his distance when it came to his wife. He said they were all together all the time, all three of them, which doesn't even sound right to me, because husband and wife need time to themselves. You can't be around them all the time and expect the man not to be jealous. Common sense. Maybe because of his age, he's young. I don't know. But he needs to learn a thing or two about married people. But I thought Soular was not being honest, because we saw where he was rubbing Jaguar's shoulder before she threw her son's ashes on those folks in front of the barbershop. He was rubbing her shoulder and saying things of encouragement to her, almost as if he was approving of the behavior that Jaguar was exhibiting. And then Gerald, in one of his interviews, said that he thought that something happened between them. Although they were always together, he said there were moments he went to the bathroom in the house and came out, and it looked to him like if something had happened. I guess, when people are maybe stealing a case, folks, and you come out and they have that guilty look on their face. It's something you cannot really pinpoint, but your sixth sense is kicking in and tell you that something happened, something is not right. That's how he was feeling. And so I think that maybe started the jealousy. Soular said he and Goomba were okay. They were buddies, pals. And then Goomba started to get jealous over the relationship that he had with Jaguar. But it looks like if Soular is really house skipping from one house to the next, he doesn't have a place of his own. So when he left Velvet, he hooked up with Jaguar, moved in with Jaguar 2 weeks after meeting her. After he left Jaguar, he went back to Velvet because they're together now, and she's pregnant. So as it pertains to the barber shop, a lot of people were wondering, why didn't Goomba go to jail for assaulting Soular? And Soular said he was given the option of filing charges against Goomba, but did not. Because he said Goomba doesn't need to be sitting in jail. He needs help. He needs psychiatric help. Some type of help anyway. Might not be psychiatric, but he needs help. So he's bashing Goomba and saying, well, his mentality is that of a child. So he's very dismissive of Goomba. And remember, he was living with these people. He was living in their home after 2 weeks of meeting the wife. So I'm sure if someone thinks of you lesser than you are, you're going to pick up on it. So I think that was part of the dynamic also. One of the reasons why they had this big blow up in front of the barber shop. So he's very divisive, almost like if he wants to break up their home. When you come into a relationship and you're friends with people, especially if you're new to the relationship with these folks, you do not side, you do not pick sides, you do not voice your opinion. You just sit back and watch everything play out. But Soular interjected himself in these people's marriage. So Soular says he's 27 years old and he's gone through a lot. But we can see it on his face. His face says a lot. It looks like if he's an older man. Looks like if he's in his 30s. He's only 27. Young guy. So he said he didn't want to file charges because Goomba does not need to be in jail. He needs to be worked on in some type of psychiatric evaluation. So Soular said the reason why they were in Louisiana, all three of them, Jaguar, himself, and Gerald, was to celebrate the 1 million views she hit when she did real life street stars. So he pretty much was saying the same thing that we've heard before. That Goomba kept pulling out his gun and was very menacing. He said Goomba pulled out a gun in the car and was pointing it at Jaguar and telling her if she wants to kill him, go ahead. Go ahead and do so. And then he pointed it to himself, said he was going to end his life. And it was a horrific situation. But you would think that Soular, now knowing that jealousy is creeping into Goomba's head, you would think that he would make his exit and say, maybe I overstayed my welcome. He was only with these people not even a good 2 weeks, and all this drama was happening. So you would think he would have said, okay, let me get out of here. No, he dug his heel in and was stating that Jaguar wants him there. But guess what? Gerald is the man of the house. You have to respect the man of the house. But then again, Soular was coming from a background from this Carbonation where there was no respect at all. Everybody was screwing everybody's girlfriend, wife, and it was all kinds of swapping going on. So coming into Jaguar and Goomba's life, he had no boundaries. He had no respect for their relationship. So this part of the story I had never heard before, because Soular said they drove around for 36 hours, no sleep, with Goomba ranting and raving in the car. At one point, they even got out and tried to hitch a ride, but then decided to get back in. I guess nobody was stopping. But Goomba was ranting and raving, saying that he was going to kill himself in front of mom and the son, Jaguar's son and mom, so they can be traumatized for life. Now, this is the story Soular is telling, but I had never heard it from either Jaguar nor Gerald. This is the kind of nonsense that was going on. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but he's telling his story. Jaguar nor Goomba never said that. So then he said, Jaguar is perfectly sane, and Goomba is the one who keeps putting her in these mental institutions because she's got a bad reputation with the police. But I'm wondering if he has seen all the tapes of Jaguar, the airport, calling the mayor's office, calling the detective, calling, going into the police department with a knife in her pocket, all these things, and he's still saying she's perfectly sane. Well, I guess she's sane when she has taken her medication. But when she does not take her medication, we see the bipolar, we see the mania, we see how bad it can get. So he said something I really had to take pause and think about, because he said that the type of personality that Goomba have, these are your murderers of the world. These are the type of people that snap and take people out. That's how much he thinks about Goomba. He and Jaguar are now close, but Goomba and Soular are not on speaking terms at all. Therefore, it doesn't surprise me that he should speak so ill of him. And then I began to think, on the other hand, when you and your spouse or you and anybody you're living with fights a lot and you feel as though your life is maybe endangered, and the person is always threatening you because they got a gun and they're pointing it at you and they're planning on taking you out, taking themselves out. So you feel as though your life is in a balance. And a lot of times what people do, they will ask for somebody else to come live with them. They will jump at the chance when there's someone who needs a place to stay and the person is homeless temporarily, like Soular. And so he must have told Jaguar that he left his girlfriend and he doesn't have a place, and she jumped at it. This is all alleged. She jumped on that and said, well, come stay with me, because she knew she and Goomba was going through it. And he was always threatening her with that gun, planning on doing X, Y, and Z. So that's what I was thinking when she invited Soular to come live with them, that he would have been an added protection for her. So as he was talking, I got a keen sense that this was trauma bonding, that all three of them bonded over the trauma in their lives, whatever it was. For Soular, it was different. For Jaguar and Goomba, they were going through their own thing, but it was trauma bonding. So Soular says, prior to the big fight in the barbershop, Gerald was talking to Shaka. Shaka is also an ex-member of CarbonNation. So Soular kept saying he was trying to mend things, but how can you mend things when you're putting a wrench in it at the same time? It's like the wheels are going and you put a little stick in between the wheels to stop the wheels from turning around. So he's putting little wrenches in it by talking negatively about Goomba. And of course, if you're going to be siding with the wife against the husband, that's a wrench that you're throwing in the midst. So he said prior to Gerald attacking him and fighting him, Gerald was actually fighting Jaguar, beating up on her, and everybody in the barbershop was standing out there just watching. They weren't even trying to pull him off of her, and she was fighting back. So that was the dynamic when Soular and Jaguar got to the barbershop. So Soular then said, because nobody at the barbershop was intervening and allowing Goomba and Jaguar to fight, he stepped in and he was holding Gerald by the waistline, his belt area. And he started to tell him that he's better than that, he needs help, don't do this. And that's when Gerald started to swing on him. He hit the ground, shielding himself, but all the while telling Gerald, I love you, man, just to calm him down. Because they've had those talks before where he has said, I love you, man. Just give him massages on the back of his neck just to calm him down. So he was trying to pull up with that same type of energy. When Gerald was throwing punches at him in front of the barber shop, he was still trying to calm him down. He was still trying to say, I love you, man, and shielding himself all the while as Gerald was throwing punches. And here again, there's an old saying, age brings wisdom. So I think Soular wasn't really thinking. He prides himself on being smart, but how smart are you when you don't know a couple no more than a week and a half? You move in with them and you're in the middle of their conflict. You're in the middle of all this chaos. You have interjected yourself. You did not stay from afar looking in and maybe encourage them to do some counseling. You are a part of it where this man is swinging on you. You are hugging the wife in the car and giving her neck rubs, knowing that she just threw her son's ashes on people in front of a barber shop. And all of that you're oblivious to. You are part of the problem at that point and not the solution. He only left because Goomba insisted that he is not going to pass the threshold or he would be on live. And that's when he left. Because he knew Goomba was serious at that point. To come into a man's house and disrespect him, even if nothing happened, you are cozying up to the wife. You're siding with the wife at that point for whatever reason. Maybe it was through the music that they had that bond, and then they trauma bonded, of course, from what happened in her life in the past to the present, and his life also past to the present. But you do not come into people's lives and put a wrench. You're supposed to be helping, but he did not help. He was part of the problem and not part of the solution. So when he had his little interview with Real Life Productions, I think he was very disingenuous. He did not tell the whole truth. So the part that we did not see was him taking the ashes also and rubbing it on his face. He said he did the same thing as Jaguar and rubbing it on his face. Now, we didn't see that part. So he said he did exactly what Jaguar was doing with ashes. He took it, he blew it, he rubbed it on his face, and it was very beautiful and spiritual. And he thought Jaguar appreciated that. Now, guys, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. He took Giovanni's ashes and rubbed it on his face because Jaguar was rubbing the ashes on her face. And he felt it was very spiritual and she appreciated it. The craziest thing I ever heard. Desecration of a human body. That's not the way you get rid of a human body. So Soular says he considers Velvet his wife and vice versa. He said she's going through a divorce and he is going through a divorce. So then Soular talks about moving every year of his life. He's 27. So if you move every year, that's a lot of moving for that age. And so talks about his instability and living with just about everybody. So this is why it was so easy for him to go live with Jaguar after meeting her no more than a week, because he's used to that. So now we get a clear sense of his background. So he says his religious background is Jehovah's Witness. So he says he was in a very, very depressed state when he saw Nature Boy on television, and the things that he was saying was what he was feeling and what he was actually thinking. And he had never heard anybody else spouting those ideas. And so he just decided, you know what, I'm unhappy in the system. I may as well go into the jungle and live where Nature Boy is, because at least we think alike. So he decided to pack his bags and hightail out of the system. And he started to talk about how he got the name Soular. It was quite by accident. He was down at the studio, Mikeville studio, interning. He said he was working for free. You know, when you're an intern, you work for free. And so he said everybody was feeling his vibe because I guess they probably heard his voice. And they wanted him, I guess, to showcase his singing talent. And they asked him, well, what's your stage name? What do you go by? And he said, when I was in high school, I had a name. And they began to make fun of the name. He said for a good half an hour. And Tyreek, one of the guys in the studio who goes by the name of Tyreek, said, you know what? Your vibe touches everyone. Because they were feeling him, you know? They liked the sound that was coming out of his mouth. And he said, your vibe touches everyone. So you should name yourself Soular. Because they did not like his stage name that he had when he was in high school and performing. So the name stuck, and that's where Soular came from Tyreek. So he says he's currently singing and producing, and he's got a song with Jaguar Right. So Soular said he's been there, done that. He's had the homes, he's had the money, he's had everything that you would want materially, but he wasn't happy, he was depressed. So he said he gave all of that up to be in nature with Nature Boy, just the free life, because he said that was more fulfilling to him than all the money and the riches, because all the money and the riches did not make him happy. So he said the money did not give him the happiness. He also told an interesting story that when he got his passport to travel to where Carbonation was, he had to make a decision of going with Nature Boy in the tropics or signing a deal that had just came in for $5 million. A Japanese guy wanted him to do some tracks. He was going to pay him $5 million, and he said he chose the passport because the way he looked at it, he said, this is the devil trying to derail me from what I really want to do, to be happy. So he chose the passport, and he went out there with Nature Boy in the jungle to live off the land. I don't know. Some people might say that's a little crazy, because you could have taken the money, lay down the tracks, do the songs, fulfill your obligation, whatever length of time it was, maybe 2 years. And after that obligation was fulfilled, go into the jungle and join up with Carbonation. Because if the Japanese producer wanted him to do some tracks for $5 million, maybe the contract was 2 years. He could have put that off for 2 years. But he said he was depressed, and all the money that he went through did not make him happy. So $5 million, of course, wouldn't make him happy either. So he just left that behind, took the passport, and left the U.S. And he said he was very disappointed because they were not knowledgeable. They were not embracing the spirituality that he thought they should be embracing. He was very disappointed. The only person who he was impressed with was the leader. And Velvet. Now, he said he didn't have a crush on Velvet, but I have a feeling he had a crush on Velvet. And the reason why he could not get to Velvet, because she was the wife of the leader. So he said when he went to the group and he joined the group, Eligio, the leader, ranked him up very quickly. Because remember, they had commonality. They liked the same things. They talked the same way. And I guess Eligio saw something in Soular that maybe he saw it himself. So he ranked him up quickly, and he became in charge of everybody else. He was like second in command. So Soular said that Nature Boy was fake, in his opinion, because he had to end up teaching him some things. So he said most of their money came from military checks. They always had a lot of money. He was the money guy. He was in charge of getting the money together, making sure they have investments. This is why they were able to travel from one place to the next, like Panama, Mexico. This is where he was: Panama, Mexico, Hawaii, Nicaragua. But the group traveled to other parts of the Americas, South America. And so he said they were not dependent upon the social security checks as much as the military checks, because they were making a lot of money. They were living large because they had the best houses. When they traveled from one place to the next, they would rent all these high-end houses that was close to the jungle. And then they would go out into the jungle to sleep, I guess for the show, but then had the option also of going into the house certain times. So it wasn't as people thought that they were in the jungle all the time, sleeping in the open environment. They also had a house, a regular house that they could go into if they wanted to. And I guess the leader, Jelio, would have to decide when to go into the house. He also said if he had done a background check on Nature Boy, he would have never joined up with him. But he would have still went off, I guess, somewhere in Mexico and do his own thing in the wild, because that's where his mind was at the time. And this was surprising to me when he said he thought CarbonNation was a satanic cult. Very surprising. Never thought he was going to say that. So he said the premise of this whole thing about CarbonNation, what they stand for, their statement behind what they stand for. Their core belief was that they were going to be protected in nature when Armageddon comes. That's why he believes it was a satanic cult, because they were supposed to be the chosen ones in nature, and everybody else was going to be destroyed when Armageddon comes. And he said that to him is satanic, now that he thinks about it and look back on his experience. And once everyone got destroyed, they would repopulate the earth. And how many times did we hear about different cults that have the same premise? When you go back in time with all these cults that came before CarbonNation, that was the main premise, that they were going to repopulate the earth when Armageddon comes. That was always the big belief behind all these cults that came and went. He then say he was a member of CarbonNation for 4.5 years. That's a long time. He went in when he was, I think he said 23. So pretty much he just got out when the leader went into jail last year. So they're fresh out of this cult. So, the thinking is a certain way. So when he met up with Jaguar, he is still in this cult-like modem, I think, because he was showing the same aggression and the hands-on with the wife, Jaguar, and trying to ostracize her from Goomba, put a wedge in their relationship so he can get closer to Jaguar. That's what Nature Boy was doing to all of them with their relationships, with their wives. He would isolate the men and he would screw the women. Because when you've been in a cult, you need some time to detox. Some people even go through programming, reverse programming, where they sit with a counselor, a therapist, for them to reprogram them. And none of these people ever went through any of that, as far as I know. They're just existing again. Because a couple of days ago, I saw where the wives got together. Some of these wives got together, and they were chanting. And so they're still in the same mind frame. Although Soular said that he is past that, I think he's in the same mind frame. Why I say that? Because he said he did the same thing Jaguar did by taking her son's ashes and rubbing it on his face. That is very, very, to me, a cult-like activity. Almost demonic. Who does that? Who takes somebody's ashes and rubs it on their face? For what reason? For what purpose? That's not the way you're supposed to dispose of a body. So what? The remaining ashes, they're going to think of something else to do, maybe get a foot massage with it. It doesn't make sense. So he said the sex part was on a level of abuse. Why? Because the women all wanted to be chosen by Agelio to have sex because they thought they were special when they were chosen by him. So that's an abusive kind of setup where you can have sex with any woman, and although the women may have their husbands there, and so that's where the abuse came in. So now he gets deeper into the sexual abuse of the people who were there, and he started to talk about Agelio, the leader of Carbonation, said that everybody should be thankful to swallow his sperm, including the children. So this is the bizarre part. Soular said that Agelio believes that if you can take everybody there, men as well as the women, they should be able to take his penis in the behind. That would take them to a higher plane. Now we understand why he's sitting in jail today. So he said pretty much he has been in a relationship with pretty much all the women in Carbonation. That's how much free the sex was. Everybody was having sex with each other. So then he started to talk about the abuse of the women. He said the majority of them had run away multiple times. And it just seems to me that they went and picked the women back up, or I don't know why they returned. But he said the majority of the women who were there ran away multiple times. For you to run away and come back, whether it was of your own free will or not, it's kind of insane that this was going on. So this was the type of abuse that was going on. Of course, Soular was telling the story to paint himself in a good light. But we all know for you to have sex with almost every woman in Carbonation, you yourself were abusing those women, allegedly. He said they have been beaten multiple times, but they return. Some of them, they went and pick up at the bus station, the bus stop, the Greyhound, because when you're talking who controlled the money, these women did not control the money. It was Soular and Agelio. And if you think about it, these women are isolated in a jungle setting. If they run through the jungle trying to get away, they run into the town, then what? Where are they going to find the money to get on a plane, to get on whatever? I guess they could have gone to the U.S. Embassy, but you need money to get there. And maybe they did reach out to strangers to ask for help, but no one would help them because remember, they didn't speak the language. They're in Panama, they're in Nicaragua, Mexico, Belize. They're in Spanish-speaking countries. And I don't think these people were speaking Spanish. So how can they convey that they were running from this camp with this lunatic who wanted to have sex with them and have them as sex slaves and was abusing them? They could not convey that in English, I would think. But not when you're dealing with a lot of natives. If you got to the township, then you can find people who speak English. But when you're in these rural areas, the people primarily are speaking the native language. So he said there are people who he knows personally are dealing with this Stockholm syndrome when you fall in love with your capture. People beat you. In this particular case, these women were beaten and demeaned and made to have sex with other people and just, stripped from all their humanity. And they're still considering themselves part of Carbonation. And they still are in love with Agelio. So when he gets out, all he got to do is round up these women again and continue with his Carbonation somewhere else in the world. They had the money. So if he wanted a bus ticket, they would purchase that ticket. But a lot of the women, I guess, knew that they couldn't get that bus ticket purchased to go back home. So they would run away. And I guess when they caught up with them, they would beat them. And he said he don't know where these women are today. And he don't know why they returned. So Soular said he does not know why these women kept returning. Well, I got one answer for that. They kept returning because they didn't have any money. You had the money. You and Agelio. So they would run into the jungle, try to get away, have no way to get out of the jungle, so they'd have to return. You were the treasurer. You were keeping the money, tracking the money. You were in charge of all the money. So if these women wanted to get out, they would have had to ask you for the money to get the hell out of Dodge. But you were too scared of Agilio to help these women out. Maybe you were partaking in the abuse yourself. So you had no incentive for them to get out. Allegedly. But that's why they kept returning. They were in a strange country. They did not have money to get on a plane, to do anything, to help themselves to get out of that bad situation. So then he talked about the rumor that Agilio made love in front of children. And he said he heard that rumor when he had first gotten there, but he never witnessed it. But people did talk about it. But if you think about it, Agilio believes that everybody should drink his sperm, including the children. So it's not so far-fetched that he would make love in front of children. It's really a sick mind. And I don't know how people can follow somebody like that. You got to wonder about the human mind. How much will they sweep under the rug when they believe in someone? This is why you follow God and not follow man. Now, here's a little sidebar, folks. Agilio, Nature Boy, the leader of CarbonNation, he was in the sex industry for over 10 years. He was actually a porn star. So this is why sex was so important to him in this particular cult that he formed, that he would have sex with any woman that he wanted to. And Soular said he was grooming the men. There were a few transsexuals in the cult, and he saw where he was close to those guys. So Soular said that he knew that he was working on the men next. He went through the women. It was the men's turn next, and he was going to, I guess, screw every last one of them if he had to. So Soular said when he found out all these things about Agilio while he was there, he said he kind of questioned himself whether he should be there or not. And he went through this identity crisis of not knowing who he was anymore, because this is not the person he wanted to follow. And this is not the organization he wanted to be a part of. And so he went through this questioning period. So he's done 10 years in the sex industry. I'm talking about Agilio now. And he started off dancing for men. So he's got a thing with men, you know, pleasing men, performing for men. Out there in the bushes with all those men, it's not enough for him to screw the women. He had to get to the men also. So now we're seeing the mentality of Agilio. So this is all alleged, but I'm wondering, since Soular was so close to him, Soular was the second in command. He was his right-hand man. I'm wondering if he got to him in any way and have some type of sexual encounter that Soular is not speaking about, because those are not the type of things you talk about as a man, right? A heterosexual man, that you were in a compromising situation by force with another man. Allegedly. So this is alleged, but that's what I'm thinking. Since he obeyed Agilio when he told him to go in a corner and stand, what else did he obey him in? That's what I'm wondering. Soular also said some of the scenes that we saw on TV were staged. When, for instance, the white guy was bowing down and kissing Agilio's feet, that was all pre-planned. Everyone discussed what they were going to do, and it was like that with a lot of scenes. And after the scene is over, then everybody's back to normal, the camaraderie among them. But he said some of these scenes were staged for the masses, for people to think a certain way, like if CarbonNation was really successful. And also, the leader was God. So they would stage those type of scenes. And of course, those type of scenes brought in a lot of money, because those who wanted to buy into those narratives would send money to them to encourage them to continue the good work. So Soular said in the end, Agilio was calling him a demon because he was thinking a little differently from him, wanted a different path, and so he was calling him a demon. And the way this 3 came out, because Agilio thought himself as 3 God. He was calling himself 3 God. and wanted everybody to say 3 all the time. And to the point where they would make the sign of 3, that sign 3 over the eye. He also said one of the things that Jelio would do was record people while he was demeaning and debasing them and making them very subservient. So when he released his videos, people would see how he treats people and how people worship him in spite of the maltreatment. So Soular said the last title Virgilio had for himself wasn't Nature Boy, it was 3 God. So can you imagine, folks, that Virgilio was telling his followers, if they said 3 a million times, I don't know how they're going to keep track of saying 3 a million times. But he told them if they said 3 a million times, they would get $1 million. Can you imagine the lunacy? So Soular was sitting there on the couch at Real Life Productions breaking down how this cult worked. And he said they did a lot of things to get money. For instance, when they would have the white guy kneel in front of Virgilio and kiss his feet, or any kind of stage performance that they would decide what to do, it was all calculated that they got a lot of money as a result. Soular then got into something that was very disturbing. As if the other stuff mentioned was not bad enough, he got into something that was just as equally as disturbing as the aforementioned things that were mentioned before. He said Agilio killed his unborn daughter with alcohol. He said he raped his wife, his pregnant wife. So I don't know if they were legally married. He said he is married and he's going to a divorce. So I guess that was his wife. And I'm telling you guys, the story is so disturbing as to all that went on in this Carbonation. Agilio was really like a monster. For you to rape a pregnant woman and force feed her alcohol, causing her to lose that child. So Soular said raping his wife, when Agilio raped his wife, it was more than one time. So I gotta wonder what kind of man is Soular, that he would allow another man to rape his pregnant wife, who then lost the baby and still opened his mouth, fixed his mouth to say, I forgive you, Allegio. Although she lost the baby due to the multiple rapes and him feeding her alcohol while he was raping her. So Soular said he and his wife came up with a plan for this information not to get out. Because if it had gotten out that he caused the death of this unborn child by raping his wife and feeding her alcohol several times, then he would be put in jail. So they came up with a plan not for him not to go to jail. They were protecting the rapist. And so the plan was that the umbilical cord choked the child. And that's what they put out there in social media. How horrifying is that? I mean, I've heard some things about this Carbonation, but when Soular broke it down, it really hit home how they were living, the kind of life they were living. They were living with a monster. So Soular said the child was being born, and during the delivery is when the child died. She died when they looked at the placenta. They said the placenta was poisoned. And the only thing that could have poisoned the placenta to that point, it was the alcohol that she was drinking when she was being raped by Agilio. So essentially, the placenta was dying because of alcohol toxicity. And he said he didn't know anything about it. These things happened when he wasn't there, behind his back. And I'm wondering if his wife had told him at the time or if she kept it a secret. Because I would think if she made him aware of what was going on, that she was being raped multiple times by Agilio, that he would get out. But it's obvious to me that he knew, because he said that he and his wife came up with a plan to protect Agilio because they did not want him going to jail. So he knew. and yet he stayed. And in the latter part, he said he knew about it and they tried to cover it up to protect him. But I'm wondering if they covered it up really to protect him or to continue with the money they were getting, because he said quite a bit of money came through that place. And he was in charge of the money because he was doing all the bookings, all the rentals, all the investment, anything that has to do with property. So the money was being controlled by Soular. And I wonder who came up with that idea to protect Allegio. Was it Soular or was it his wife? Because his wife didn't have anything to gain. On the other hand, Soular had everything to gain. That money would be stopped if Agilio went to jail, which ultimately happened anyway because another young lady filed charges of rape and then they did an investigation and all this allegation about child abuse, etc., landed him in jail. So, although Soular had his little interview with Real Life Productions, I don't think he was telling everything. He held some things back. And I think the things he held back has to do with his involvement. Of course, you're not going to implicate yourself in any crime. And I think those are the things he held back. All alleged. So Soular said after he told Agilio that his wife lost the baby, Agilio blamed him for the wife losing the baby, not the fact that he was raping her and feeding her alcohol, which poisoned the umbilical cord, causing the child not to have enough strength when the child was being delivered, and of course, deprivation of oxygen. So the child died during delivery. She didn't have enough strength to hold on. Her breathing was not strong enough, and the umbilical cord was already poisoned. Essentially, it was dying. And so that was a direct result of the mother ingesting all that alcohol each time she was being raped. But who does that? Who rapes a pregnant woman? Only a monster. Soular also said he has videos of Agilio, the leader of CarbonNation, stroking himself in front of men and the women would watch. And so the only thing that comes to my mind is, what is he doing with tapes of a man stroking himself in front of other men and women watching? Is that a fetish thing? Does that turn him on? Because no heterosexual man would even entertain any aspect of having those tapes in their home. This is very disturbing, folks. Very, very, very disturbing. I mean, Agilio is really bad, but I'm wondering what kind of man is Soular to entertain all these things. He was actually telling on himself. The level of tolerance for such nonsense was very high. So he said that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because about 2 or 3 days after, he was out of there because that was too much. That was getting too much. But prior to that, a lot of those things were too much. It didn't have to wait. He didn't have to wait until it got to him stroking himself in front of the men and the women watching. What about the other things that he did? Having sex in front of children, saying that everybody should be drinking his sperm. I mean, that didn't wake him up. He didn't have to wait, 4.5 years to find that out. He knew right from the start, because he said when he first got there and he checked everyone out, the people weren't what he thought they would have been, more advanced intellectually. Only person he could talk to was Agilio, because they were on the same level. So he knew from the get-go, so why stay? So Soular went on to say he had the money to get him out of jail. He had a lawyer in place, because remember, these people were making a lot of money. This is why the whole group was able to travel from one country to the next, because they had the money. So he said that he called him up and told him he was about to get him out of jail. Now Soular and the other group members were at the house. And so when Soular was talking to him that he was going to bail him out, Allegio said to him over the phone, "You think I did it?" And then another man in the room, another group member, said to Soular, "Go stand in the corner." Because this man was putting Soular on punishment because Allegio thought that Soular was being disrespectful. because he said, "You think I did it." So he was accusing Solar without him knowing whether or not he actually thought he did it. But just by him saying that, "You think I did it," that was punishment enough. So the other man told Solar to go stand in the corner. Solar then started to walk towards the corner, to stand in the corner. And then he turned around and he said, "You know what? This is it. This is enough." He went towards the man and he told the man that that would be his last day in that organization. And the next day he was out. But I have a feeling if Agelio was still out of jail and still doing the same things, Solar would have been an active participant still. So I found it quite interesting that Solar said in order to get to where he is today, he had to go through those moments in Carbonation and he wouldn't change a thing, which I found very interesting because I'm sure there's some things he would have changed, but for him to get out and say, "Nope, I wouldn't change a thing because I had to go through that journey to get to where I am today," that was interesting to me because there's no way I could have gone through that without saying, if I had to go through a journey like that, I would not change anything. I would definitely change a number of things. But here is where it gets more interesting. He said he still picks up the phone for Nature Boy if he calls. He has forgiven him. Velvet has his daughter. Velvet has a daughter for Nature Boy. So now Solar and Velvet are living together. So Solar said he makes sure that Agelio's daughter is okay, although Agelio killed his child. And I hope he maintains that same premise because I would hate for him to turn on that child. And again, a quick reminder that he killed his daughter by raping Solar's wife and giving her alcohol every single time he would rape her, which poisoned the placenta and the umbilical cord, causing the child not to have enough strength, not enough life, not enough oxygen to survive. So now he's raising Agelio's daughter. Velvet is pregnant. He said he's been in this child's life, Agelio's daughter's life, since she was a year old. So he then said that everybody in Carbonation took wives. He had a couple of wives. And his wives would leave him and go have sex with Agelio, and then he would come back and he would forgive them. But what choice did they have? If Agelio wanted to have them, he would just tell them to come to his place. And so I couldn't help but wonder if him hooking up with Velvet was getting back at Agelio for having sex with his wives. Now he's having sex with Agelio's wife. So I guess it's a wash. So guys, that was Solar giving us an inside look as to what went on in Carbonation. However, he did not tell us what he did in the complicity with Nature Boy in all these atrocities that happen. When the story is told by those who are telling the story, they always paint themselves in a good light. Remember that. I'm over and out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel and to this video. Thank you all for watching.